Get your free copy of the complete tutorial at www.teachucomp.com/free.
After setting the correct white balance in an image, you can proceed to make additional tonal adjustments to the camera raw image if desired. To do this, use the sliders shown below the white balance section on the Basic tab in the Settings panel at the right side of the Camera Raw dialog box. Note that the specific sliders that appear within this section depend on which process you selected from the Process drop-down on the Camera Calibration tab. To use the automatic settings as specified within the selected Camera Raw image, you can click the Auto Hyperlink. To use the default settings for the model of camera selected, after making changes to the slider values, you can click the default hyperlink to reset the values. Alternately, you can reset all of the changed settings for a camera raw image by holding down the Alt key on your keyboard, or the Option key for Macs, and then pressing the Reset button at the bottom right corner of the Camera Raw dialog box. To manually adjust the exposure for the selected camera raw image, use the Exposure slider. Alternatively, you can enter a value into the adjacent field. This adjusts the brightness or darkness of the image. Move the slider to the left to darken the image. Conversely, move the slider to the right to brighten the image. The values shown in the adjacent field are equivalent to f-stops. So a setting of +1 is equivalent to widening the camera aperture by 1 f-stop. Likewise, a value of -1 is equivalent to reducing the aperture by 1 f-stop. Also note that you can use this slider to preview where highlights are clipped within an image. To do this, hold down the Alt key or the Option key on Macs on your keyboard while moving the Exposure slider to display any clipped regions as colored areas within the image. The color indicates areas clipped in only 1 or 2 color channels. Non-clipped areas appear black. Simply move the slider until the non-specular highlights, meaning highlights that are not from light or reflected light, are completely clipped. Then slightly reverse the adjustment you have made. To manually adjust the contrast of a camera raw image, use the Contrast slider. Note that you should generally only adjust the contrast of an image after adjusting the exposure, shadow, and brightness values. You can slide the slider to the left to decrease the values, resulting in less mid-tone contrast within the image. You can slide the slider to the right to increase the values, resulting in increased mid-tone contrast in the image. You can also enter values into the adjacent field for the slider if preferred. If using the 2010 or 2003 process, you will see a recovery slider. This slider is used in older processes to attempt to recover details and clipped highlights in an image. This can help recover image details and highlights where 1 or 2 color channels have been clipped to white. Likewise, the Fill Light slider can be used to recover details from shadows without brightening blacks in the image in the older process versions. These older processes also include a Blacks and Brightness slider. The Black slider is used to specify which input levels are mapped to black in the final image. Increasing this value or sliding the slider to the right will expand the areas that are mapped to black. The Brightness slider is used to adjust the brightness of the image. It increases image brightness when the slider is moved to the right. If using the 2012 or newer processes, you will see the Highlights and Shadows sliders instead of the Recovery and Fill Light sliders. You can use the Highlights slider to recover details in overexposed highlight areas of an image. You can use the separate Shadows slider to attempt to recover details in underexposed shadow areas in the image. Similarly, if using the 2012 or newer processes, you will see the Whites and Blacks sliders instead of the Blacks and Brightness sliders. The Whites slider is used to adjust the highlights in an image, and the Blacks slider is used to adjust the shadows within an image. For all process versions, you will find the Clarity, Vibrance, and Saturation sliders at the bottom of the settings pane. You can use the Clarity slider to adjust the sharpness of the edges in the image. This can restore detail and sharpness the other tonal adjustments may remove. The Vibrance slider adjusts the saturation so that clipping is minimized as colors approach full saturation. It does this by changing the saturation of all lower saturated colors without changing the higher saturated colors as much. This also helps prevent skin tones from becoming oversaturated. The Saturation slider adjusts the saturation levels of color in the image from pure monochrome to double saturation, or from a range of -100 to +100.
Like what you see? Pick up your free copy of the complete tutorial at www.teachucomp.com/free.